Hello everyone. In this lecture, we'll look at background gradients and shadow effects in CSS. To create a background gradient in CSS, we need background image property. Okay, so first let's create a div in the HTML code and then we'll go to CSS. I'm in line number 24. Div, I'm going to give some class name, my div, and closing div. See, this is an empty div. There is no text inside this div. So now I'm going to the internal CSS to style this div. We can use background image property to add background image for this div. So the syntax is background image linear gradient because we want to add a gradient effect to the background image, right? So I'm going so we have to give linear gradient, and here this linear gradient takes three values. First one is the direction of the gradient. By default it will go from left to right, but we can also specify top to bottom, or even angles we can use for the direction. First we'll use top to bottom. So that is, if you want the gradient to go from top to bottom, then we have to use to bottom. So it will start from the top and then it will go till the bottom. And here after this after the first parameter, first value, we have to give two more values. That is, at least two colors needs to be given for creating a gradient. So I am giving red and green. But if you want the gradient to be more colorful, like if you want a colorful gradient, then you can also give more than two colors. So here I am giving blue and yellow. So two colors are mandatory, but you can give as many colors you want. So the first value is direction, and the second and third values are first two colors, and then you can use as many values for giving different colors. So this is the syntax of background image property. So let me save this, and if we go to the output now, we will not see anything. Why is that? Why is it so? Okay, I'm going to the output. See, it's an empty page. We don't see anything. That is because this div in line number 26, it's an empty div. We don't have anything here. So maybe I'll enter some text here, test or something. So now I'll go and refresh this page. Now you can see there is some gradient background with different colors, and you have the text test. So if we enter some text, we can see the background image, but without any text we don't see anything. So that is how the div block behaves, because if you don't have any content inside the div, if it's an empty div, by default the width and height property of the div will be set to 0 pixels and nothing will show up. So if we want the div to show up without any content for the div, that is, I told you, right, width and height will be 0 pixels by default for an empty div. So we have to specify the width and height property in CSS for that div. So here I am going to say as 1000 pixels width, and height is some 600 pixels. Now let's refresh. Now we can see the gradient background. The gradient is going from top to bottom, and all the four colors specified, red, green, blue and yellow, is there. So here in the first value, instead of using to left or to bottom, we can also use angles. So I can give angle as 90 degree. So the direction, we can specify the direction using angles, 90 degree, 180 degree, how much ever degree you want. And we'll save, and here. So it is going in the 90 degree angle direction. Next we will see how to give transparent gradient effect over an image. That is, we'll add a background image and then add some gradient over it and also give some transparency. Number 15, here is the syntax for adding a background image with some linear gradient and also with some transparency. So we'll look at this line. So I've just rearranged this CSS styling one below other to make it look good. Okay, we have linear gradient and the first value is the degree. We are using 180 degree, and the other values, as I told you, for gradient at least 2 colors are needed. Here, instead of directly using the color name, we are using RGB codes. Remember, we saw about RGB values and hexacode values for defining colors. Here, there is another variation for RGB values. That is RGBA. RGBA means the last last parameter in RGBA is the opacity or transparency. That is the first 3 values 255, 0, 0. It will indicate the color that we want. Here first 3 values takes number between 0 and 255, and the fourth one is opacity or transparency. Okay, so here the transparency takes value between 0 and 1. So if it is 0, it is very transparent, and if it is 1, it's opaque. So we have given 0.1 here, and similarly we have given a transparency of 0.5. Okay, and here and next we have here URL, and here we have to give the image URL. Here I have used a web image URL. You can use your own local image or web image URL, anything is fine. So inside the URL we have to give the image address, that is local address or web image address. So now let's check the output. See, the image gets gradient color over it, but the image is repeating because the image size is smaller than div. To avoid this repetition, we have to use a property called background repeat. So I am going to use background repeat property, and we have to set it to no repeat. So let's save and refresh. Okay. So now no repetition now, but since the image size is smaller than the div size, it is not covering the entire div. So for that we have to use another property called background size property and then set its value to cover, so that the image size it will stretch and cover the entire div. Background size cover. Let's save and check the output. Okay, now it's good. This is how we create a background image with gradient effect using CSS. Hope this is clear to you. Next we will see how to give shadow effects, how to create shadow effects for buttons and text using CSS. So for that I am going back to the HTML part. I am going to create a hyperlink now. Then we will use CSS to style the hyperlink into a button. So to create hyperlink, I am going to use a tag ahref. This is a dummy hyperlink, so I am just using hash because it's not going to point any website link. So ahref is equal to hash and then class. So I am going to give some CSS class name. So it's my button. So some text for the hyperlink and then close. So now in CSS, line number 22, we are going to style this hyperlink using the class selector. So we will give some basic properties like padding, background color. So let me give some padding as 10 pixels. Padding is the inner space around the content, right? So around the content I want an inner space of 10 pixels on all the 4 sides. And then background color, we'll give some background color. I'll go with slate blue. Next, I'm going to give some border radius. Remember this border radius property? This property will make the edges round. I want the button edges to be little round. So I'm going to use border radius 10 pixels. And then font size, I'm going to try with 18 pixels. And one more thing, like hyperlink by default, they'll have a underlining in the bottom. So if I want to convert the hyperlink into a button, I don't want that underlining. So in order to remove that, I'm going to use text decoration property and set it to none, so that it will remove the underlining effect. And since the background color is blue, I think it will be kind of a dark blue. We'll check. Then the text will not be visible if it is black. So I am changing the font color of the text to white. Okay. So till now we have not touched the shadow effect part. These are all the basic properties for converting a hyperlink into a button. But buttons will look good only with some little shadow effect given. So we'll see how to give a shadow effect for this button. So for that we have to use box shadow property. So it's box shadow. The first value is how much shadow is needed in the horizontal part, that is left to right. So for left to right I want 4 pixels thickness shadow. And then the second value is top bottom shadow. So there also I'll give 4 pixels. It takes 3 values. The first is shadow from left to right. The second value is shadow from top to bottom. And the third is color. So I'll give shadow color as gray. So let's save this and go to the output. Okay, here is the output. So here below this div with some background image, we have a button, that is we have styled the hyperlink to be to a button. Now let's explore this button using the developer tools. So we have padding. So I am taking out padding. You can see the effect. Padding is on. And then border radius. If you take the border radius, there is the edges are becoming sharp. And text decoration. So if you take the text decoration, you see a hyperlink. That is, the hyperlink comes with the underlining by default, right? So to take that, we use text decoration property. And finally, this is a box shadow effect. So box shadow, as I told you, the first value is for giving shadow effect from left to right. So if I make this 0 pixels, then we can see the shadow only at the bottom. And similarly, I'm just changing this to 4 pixels. And if I change the second value to 0 pixels, we can see the shadowing effect only from left to right. And the third is the color. So we have used gray color, so we are getting a gray shadowing effect. Right? Okay. Just like box shadow property, we have another property called text shadow. So let's go back to Sublime Text. So in line number 51, I'm going to create a H1 element. Oh, sorry, this is HTML, right? I'm going to create a H1 heading text shadow property. And we'll style this H1 using element selector in CSS. So I'm in line number 33. Okay, so for giving text shadow, we use text shadow property in CSS. Text hyphen shadow. Just like box shadow property, text shadow property also takes similar values. That is, the first value correspond to shadowing effect from left to right. So I'm going to give 2 pixels. And then second is the shadowing effect from top to bottom. So there also I'm going to give 2 pixels. There is also one more value that text shadow property takes. The third one is blur, kind of creating a blur effect. So I'm going to give 4 pixels for that. So we'll explore this using developer tools so that we can understand better. And the fourth is the color. So I'm giving gray color. So the first one is horizontal shadowing part and vertical shadowing and then blurring and then fourth is color. So let's save this and go to the output. Okay, here is our output and we have our text h1 element text shadow property below the button. So let's explore this using developer tools. So now I have made a horizontal shadow to 4 pixels and vertical shadow to 0 pixels, and we can see the shadow only in the horizontal axis. Okay, so this is how text shadow property works. In this lecture we learnt about CSS gradients. The next class we'll learn about HTML form elements. Thank you.